The movie I watched this week was Das Land hinter dem Regenbogen, and the first and most obvious physical boundary you see is the inside of Stalina versus the outside, or metaphorically, the East and West Germany. You have the outside, which is a desert, a wasteland, devoid of life. It doesn't have character, no sign of history, nothing solid to distinguish it from anything else. And this is a sharp contrast to the inside of Stalina, which is a veritable Eden and this image of utopia. It's an oasis of life and beauty and has a rich history and thriving culture and plenty of traditions. But even though it is a utopia and communism, it still has divisions within it. Communism was supposed to have no class stratification, and often in the movie you hear references to class fiends. But inside of the Stalina, you see a huge division between the inner circle and higher ups and the commoners. Within the inner circle, you see that there are certain perks, and some of those are like the better clothing, the things they're able to get away with. You see the higher ups often in fancier clothes like suits, and whereas the commoners have very obviously less. As you can see in this scene, even though he is an insider, Heinrich was better dressed and enjoying dancing, whereas the mother is actually doing work and has much less free time. So that is part of the division between the higher ups, which were kind of the fat cats, and the commoners. A more potent, I think, but intangible boundary that is explored is time. You have these interactions with the past, the present, and the future within the film. The past is not just Eastern Germany's past in the movie, but is its entire history. As you see here, the two boys, Hans and Regenbogen GER, are pissing on a statue of the ancient Roman times, the statue of the Golden Empire. They could also be seen, both of those boys, as two ways to interpret the East's past. One of them, Hans, is the more cruel version of the past interpretation that offers only violence and is more of a symbol of how the East was a police state, a prison, a thing that you would not want in your past. Whereas Regenbogen GER could be seen as the more beautiful time, more of a time of wonder, and giving more of a sense of nostalgia to the East. There are also references often in the movie to before Stalin's death, and that is more of a metaphor for before the death of communism in the East, which could be either as before the turning point of when things started out so good and more like a utopia and turning into more of a police state, or be interpreted literally as the fall of the Berlin Wall. The boundary here is between the past and the present. The present is more of as it's happening in Stalina. the traditions that are upheld, the debates and fights about the future of Stellina, and certainly the influences and major changes that we're going through in Stellina. Now, you could either see the future as starting with the turning point for Stellina from utopia to dystopia, or the invasion of the West and what will happen in the future after that. What I'm calling the turning point for Stellina is more of the picture that we have been given for Eastern Germany in general. Here we see him demanding permits and changing rules right in front of the people, voiding his permit and citing him for it. And you see more things like this, like the exiles, the exiles and the reporting from the kids to the adults, or of the adults to grandfather, when they were basically used as spies to see who was a supporter and who was going secretly against the communists. And this is the moment when things start to turn more perverse, more as more and more people after this point are being exiled from and kicked out of Stellina. And you start to see the nastiness that is the authorities and the higher class. And is the beginning of the fall of Stellina, I believe. And then you have the final division, final boundary, which is between the present and the future. And you see the literal invasion of the West, and it's not just all guns and smoke of the West, but there's actually an ease and an eagerness to destroy everything that they once had by the Easterners in the movie, and in, I guess you could argue, reality. They burn everything to the ground. All of their history is destroyed, and in that way they destroy their past in an effort, I guess, to for conformity or unity, I guess you could call it. And this is where you could bring up the question of whether having a unified past, a unified image of the past is necessary for the growth of the future, or if it was done a bit hastily. You also see a lot of reflection in this film, a lot of nostalgia in the very beginning. Actually, you see a literal reflection in the water of all of the history, all of the past, and as she said, she stood in flames, and she says at one point, everything I did out of love. And this is more of a reflection on the past and how it is interpreted than and whether you see the boundaries and borders as the physical between the wasteland and Eden, or temporal, or the divisions that were between classes and the divisions between people. You can tell that the movie was heavy with those kinds of symbols.